Hello, it's Hero Lugo and welcome back to part 2 of the evolution of Logic. If you missed part 1, no worries, just click the link in the description to catch up. This time around we have 3 times as many eras: the album era, the saturation era, and the next chapter. I can already feel how long this video is going to end up being, so without further ado, let's jump right in. After 5 years of constant mixtapes and singles, we make our way over to the album era, the period in which I feel the most effort went into developing strong and cohesive albums with very conceptual and intellectual themes. These are also the projects that feel the most grandiose, as Logic put his newly acquired resources to work. Using a bigger budget allowed Bobby to bring to life some of his most ambitious creative aspirations. So here we find some of Bob's best work overall. I now present to you the album era. So whilst in a creative role, continuing to both explore and indulge in this very authentic, vulnerable, and introspective side of himself, Logic had finally made it to the point of his career where he was ready to release his debut studio album. An album so full and enriched, I dare classify it as a masterpiece. Side note, I made another video about that, link again in the description. Finally ready and fully matured, in 2014, Logic blessed the world with the release of Under Pressure. Now I know I've claimed many times throughout these videos the importance of several moments and projects across Logic's career, but this may very well be the most imperative and critical points of both his discography as well as his career at large. Widely regarded as Logic's best album, and by a wide margin, this was his most commercial success to date, as well as his most critically successful. Carrying the standard version's 12 tracks with no features or distractions, Bobby took the time to showcase an unprecedented level of creativity and overall artistry. From the potent and robust Soul Food to Nikki, up and over the title track Under Pressure, Logic as first and foremost a storyteller, one with an infectious flow and a miraculous pen who stops at nothing to highlight his state of mind and his deepest of sentiments. Adding a studio album would be enough to establish and cement an artist in general, but with the caliber of this project, Logic had once more found a way to separate himself from a good chunk of other artists, proving his most staunch of detractors that he was capable of not only creating a masterful piece of art, but he could do it himself, again, without the need for features or other distractions. Now, with all of that in mind, the Rat Pack had been left wondering how on earth Bobby could follow up such an immense debut effort. But with no reason at all to really worry or even question Logic's ability to improve, just a year later, Bobby would deliver his most ambitious album ever. The Incredible True Story. Including another cover by the utmostly talented Sam Spratt, this was a landmark album for the year 2015, alongside Logic's already expansive set of projects and singles. I mean, it was not just a fan favorite, it was iconic. Performing and attending interviews and special functions in various spacesuits that embodied several facets of his own lore and creative mind, this was a branding masterclass that would continue up until this day. You see, up until that point, Bobby mostly wore whatever he wanted. Usually jeans, a hoodie, and towards the latter years even gaudy or eccentric jewelry like chains, which he would later in his career describe as an effort to fit into the general idea of what a rapper should be. But with these new outfits, and more importantly, this new album, Logic was seemingly coming to terms with who he was. A nerd, a fanatic, perhaps even an outcast. He no longer felt he was under pressure to appeal to others by masquerading as someone others wanted him to be. He had proven himself with the success of his debut and was all the better for it. So again, on his most ambient, ambitious, and eclectic album yet, Bobby conceived a hip-hop space opera, a project with a full narrative, full skits, and an even higher budget, and even more versatile sounds and styles. Opening with an interpretation of Kanye West's amazing percussional pattern, lifting us off into the world of The Incredible True Story, audiences were welcomed into a universe of Bobby's very own sci-fi machinations. Instantly, this album felt different. A new cast of characters whose story would expand past this album onto building the lore and story behind this fresh new world of Logic. So between tracks that added in a bit more singing at times, like City of Stars or Never Been, along with continuing the tradition of honing his skills over grimy 90s hip-hop beats like on Young Jesus, if you were a Logic fan, there was no genuine reason to feel disappointed. Whether it was better than Under Pressure is of course up to your interpretation. Personally, I don't think so. But regardless of anyone's opinion, it should never discredit the legacy nor the wherewithal of this album. But then again, I never met anybody who didn't like The Incredible True Story. Now, following two exceptionally strong and thought-provokingly powerful albums, Bobby was in need of a creative break. But as opposed to ending his already 6-year streak, Logic decided he would rather opt for a slight detour. A little change to keep the ball rolling as he worked on his third album. So, what exactly did that mean then? Well, Bobby Tarantino, throwing on his flex hat and putting us on an 11-song mixtape, introducing us to Logic's newest alter ego. Contrasting the boom-bap flavored Young Sinatra, Bobby Tarantino is the trap banger side of Logic we had seen plenty of glimpses of throughout the last few endeavors. With booming instrumentals and stronger deliveries than ever before, this was a much less serious, more fun series of songs meant to hold fans over throughout the summer and eventually until 2017, when Logic would be prepared to release yet another concept album. Speaking of which, this tape carried two skits between the hard-hitting bangers, A Word From Our Sponsor and Studio Ambience at Night, Malibu. Both of course serving different purposes. Beginning with the latter, Studio Ambience was a bit of a snippet of what would eventually become Africa Aryan, the closing track of his next album. But A Word From Our Sponsor was the most accurate way for Logic to define himself at that period of time. Bringing back a beloved skit from the YS days, where the fictional Marty Randolph from Sellout Records, with a demon wife, demon kid, you know, Illuminati, desperately tries to sign Logic. But instead of getting to actually speak to Logic, he's instead greeted by the Rat Pack Industries automated system, steadily increasing the wait time to speak to a representative while quote a word from their sponsor plays, the word of course being how Logic has represented his ideas of peace, love, and positivity throughout his career, failing to let another year pass without dropping a full-length project while still getting ready to release a whole other full-length conceptual album, promising to carry over the ambition from The Incredible True Story. In the end, if I had to describe Bobby Tarantino, the first word that comes to mind is fun. The mixtape is synonymous with ease of listening. From Flexecution to Slave 2 on through 44 bars, this thing has heart and it serves its purpose. Not meant to be a concept album, it's music to blast in the car, music to get hyped to, music to really do anything to. And this would most definitely not be the last we saw of Bobby Tarantino. So eventually 2016 did come to a close, and the next album Logic had been teasing and hyping up did eventually come around, but this is where things get controversial. Of course, I have my own memories and experiences with this album, but there also exists a narrative, a generally accepted theme or reaction to this project. This project, of course, being Everybody. An album known less for its actual science fiction-esque concept and more so for the hit it spawned. I found that a lot of Logic fans hold a certain resentment towards this album in the sense that the song that would go on to become Logic's first actual hit, 1-800, would catapult Bobby further into the mainstream landscape. A song that less represented Logic as far as the way he usually raps or sounds over a track in favor of a bit more pop appeal. But this was still undeniably Logic at his most authentic, as fans had come to know both his intentions and his heart at large. So, with this massive hit song featuring pop powerhouses Alicia Cara and El Paso's own Khalid, Logic gained a lot more attention and subsequently a lot more fans, which led to a rift between Bobby's older, more hardcore fan base who had witnessed him essentially grow up from being a kid rapping over his favorite hip-hop beats, and these new so-called 1-800 fans who resonated with his suicide prevention message via this more mainstream-friendly sound and style. This is what finally got Logic to the Grammys. He had earned the recognition he had always strived for. So what about the actual album as a whole? Well, keeping with these larger-than-life ideas presented in The Incredible True Story, Everybody is centered around the idea that everyone who has lived or ever will live is one single person. One person forced to live these different lives and experience all of these ranging experiences in an attempt for them to empathize and better understand, again, everybody. A swing at unifying the human race, this project can easily be seen as the best representation of Logic's mantra: peace, love, and of course, positivity. On the other hand, many of his critics would call this album preachy, lacking of substance. With relatively every track incorporating some sort of message of equality, different people had different reactions, thus leading to a mixed reaction overall. As with every other release, the production of course got better, the ideas grander, and the messages of positivity more prevalent than ever. Yet, these varying responses and perspectives to what Bobby was trying to get across mark this project as a turning point in Logic's discography at large. Also worth noting is his change of attire when marketing. Obviously, Bobby couldn't keep wearing the same spacesuits to promote his album, and therefore began to advertise his newest merch. Notably, the black everybody hoodie he'd pair with some jeans and a cap, and I guess also these fresh new pair of glasses he had. Up next, we've got the saturation era. No, not that one. Not yet anyway. This is where I find Bobby to be at his most versatile, changing entire styles and timbres whilst pushing out as much music as I feel he could. This is also where he begins to take up other pursuits, including writing novels and dropping mixtapes once again. As I stated in part 1, this is the part where Bobby begins to drop more than just one project annually, hence saturation era. As with every installment in the Bobby chronology, his appearances, styles, and visions became starker in difference and bolder in execution, leading us to 2018, where for the first time, Logic wouldn't keep up the streak, but go on to release 2 projects in a single calendar year, and where else better to go than onto another Bobby Tarantino. So on March 9th of 2018, Logic proceeded to drop Bobby Tarantino 2. Practically creating a whole new series of an alter ego themed mixtape. And in my personal opinion, I find Logic didn't just deliver the same approach as he did the first time, he improved upon it along with every other development since then. The fun ambience suddenly took itself even less seriously, the messages of peace, love, and positivity echoed some more, and the music itself was just as versatile and diverse as ever. With a shaved head and, like I said, pair of glasses, in a way this felt like the familiar Bobby we all knew and loved, but reinvented. He had entered another part of his career, a new era. So, let's take a look at all of these points individually. Basically, every track on this thing dove beyond and into the realm of summertime banger, with harder hooks, smoother production, and marquee features he had gained access to as a result of his new Grammy and mainstream appeal. As far as PLP, this man had hip-hop up-and-comer Joyner Lucas breathing down his throat ever since the Tech 9 Sriracha ordeal. But instead of clashing with the bloodthirsty Joyner, he retaliated with class and respect, allowing his achievements to speak for themselves, explaining that if it weren't for the rap game, they'd probably be friends, which of course would turn out to be true following the release of ISIS. And I doubt you need me to hype up the production, because even though I've yet to make a mention of him, 6 has been the common denominator all along, constantly growing and evolving and cranking out the most perplexing, interestingly extraordinary instrumentals. That man is a musician. Between hard hitters like 44 More and Boom Trap Protocol, this tape also had one, Warm It Up, with an especially notable feature. One that I still remember to this day, blowing me away as a fan with just one reading of the track list. The track list that reads, Warm It Up featuring Young Sinatra. The merging of these two worlds, the contrasting marriage of boom bap and trap culminating in boom trap, but also the foreshadowing of the next project of the year, Young Sinatra 4. Through such personal foresight and such undying will to just grind, we received the 4th and final Young Sinatra on September 28th. Now, this one still carries the Young Sinatra banner, but found itself much more centered on the boom tap side of things, literally on almost every single song. With a lot more honest and self-aware cuts like Legacy or The Glorious 5, this was a near complete 180 from BT2. Yet another indication of the lengths Bobby would go to in an attempt to escape being boxed in, proving he could do just about anything and everything other rappers can do. This is also where we saw the biggest change in Bobby's appearance. Like I said before, he had shaved his head, still rocking the glasses, but also had significantly increased his muscle mass. Now, like I said, this is not a before they were famous, but for the sake of what I'm about to say, I find it relevant to discuss what got Logic into hip-hop in the first place. Perhaps not so coincidentally, a Quentin Tarantino film by the name of Kill Bill had a soundtrack done by none other than hip-hop legend the RZA of Wu-Tang fame. Bobby, a big fan of both the film and subsequently its soundtrack, investigated its curator and along the way discovered the rest of Wu-Tang, along with the other famous rap acts of the time such as Big L and Nas, the latter becoming a figurehead of sorts across each and every Young Sinatra song via Illmatic's Life's a Bitch featuring AZ. So, this album then becomes special in two regards. First, it's the first officially released Young Sinatra song on a major label to land on streaming services that also includes the famous Nas sample. And second, Logic for the first time completely reassembled all living members of the Wu-Tang Clan and managed to feature them in their entirety on a single 8-minute track. Just leaving the fact that the way this story has come full circle is utterly majestic. Working with his influences and inspirations, crafting these musical identities with which to express himself in a variety of different ways, sounds, and characteristics, his career, regardless of reception or response in one way or another, is constantly exemplifying growth. But as another year came to a close, the streak would not. In an Undertaker-esque attempt to advance said streak, in 2019, Bobby embarked on a journey to not release an album or even a mixtape, but a soundtrack. A soundtrack in conjunction with a new science fiction novel. A novel that would go on to become a best-selling novel. One I remember leaving the middle of choir practice to go and purchase at a Barnes & Noble that I'd eventually spend my time reading in the midst of Saturday school. If you've made it this far in the video and you know already most of what I'm telling you, then you know exactly where this is headed. Supermarket is possibly the worst received of all of Logic's projects. It's also the most far removed from anything Bobby had done before, being that this isn't a rap soundtrack. Instead, it's more of a soft rock alternative sound, with some questioning the lyrical content, others the singing, and everything in between. I personally think there were some decent tracks amongst the bunch that can be enjoyed, but then again, I've kind of not given my personal opinion or anything because everyone is just as unique as the opinions they hold, and everyone is just as entitled to their own. The book, however, I see talked about much less by almost everyone, so I will offer some of my thoughts there. Without spoiling anything, I found the novel to be easily engaging and quite entertaining. There are some meaningful developments made throughout, as there should be, and the twists and turns feel more or less earned and overall make the story worthwhile. If you enjoy science fiction and a bit of more psychological, no pun intended, thrillers, then you should enjoy what's offered here. But as far as the music ties to the literature, it's interesting to note a few things. The main character, Flynn, is literally just Bobby. Like when I read the book, I felt as if I was reading about Bob and not a fictional character. But it doesn't come across at all as a bad thing, at least not to me. But what is cool about that is that they share the same music interests, which is more or less reflected in the soundtrack. Artists like Rex Orange County and Mac DeMarco play a massive role in influencing the overall direction of both ventures. Once more, the way you want to view either the music or the novel is up to you, yet Supermarket still represents a step away from the rap roots of Logic, sort of the opposite of what he had done the year before when Logic dove into his own lore and alter egos. Whereas in 2019, Bobby moved towards a more experimentative side, striving to push forward into the personally unexplored. But what was similar to the year before was that Logic also chose to release another project within the same year. Less than 2 months after Supermarket, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind was released. As far as Bobby's mainstream albums go, this was also the worst received by general audiences. Being online, it shouldn't be too difficult to hear this album being talked down on by a good amount of people. But what shouldn't be overlooked again is that despite what he's doing lyrically, creatively, or even personally, in his career, Logic would not stop growing. Because easily the most popular song on the track list features what many have perceived to be the greatest rapper of all time. The best-selling rapper in history, Marshall Mathers, aka Eminem. But let's not forget, Logic's dad's also featured. Not to mention, Will Smith makes an appearance, as well as artists like Wiz Khalifa. The main idea behind this project was Bobby pretty much confronting the darkness in his life, as well as the toxicity he sees across the internet. From wannabes to haters wishing Logic would end his own life, you'd think the subject matter would ensue in a gloomy, dark sonic atmosphere. Yet instead, this project feels more like a Bobby Tarantino, with a tendency towards trap beats, faster flows, and again, the reception being all over the place. With many die-hard fans swearing this is an 8 or higher, and others discrediting it as a Logic album at all. This shift, as I mentioned, that occurred around the release of Everybody in 2017 has sort of made Logic a polarizing figure in the rap game, with some still seeing him as one of the greatest to come out of the 2010s, and others finding him to be corny or unentertaining. From the greatness of an Under Pressure to the constant jokes making fun of what some see as Bobby's biracial catchphrase, which is just that he's biracial, this album was both a response and consequence of this polarizing nature. If it enforces one idea or the other is not up for me to decide, but I'm sure you have just as strong an opinion as everyone else. This brings us to the finale, the end of the streak, the culmination of project after project, of growth after grind, of experiment after invigorating experiment. A near year before Bobby would drop his next album on August 19th, 2019, Logic released something similar to what he had done with YSIV, and that was dropping a quote-unquote freestyle. In this case, the No Pressure freestyle, giving fans a taste of what was to come via bars and parts of verses from several songs in the upcoming release. However, most surprising of all, Bobby himself was able to do something not commonly seen in today's social media climate, and that's him getting to break the news that he was finally going to be a father.
And I'm having a little baby. Surprise, it's a little baby boy. Fuck TMZ, they can't get the scoop on that shit.
After years of rapping and singing about the importance of family, and more specifically, the role fatherhood would come to play in his future reality, he finally had the opportunity to enter the next chapter of not only his career, but his life. But before I get the chance to elaborate any more, time for some context. Starting way back after Everybody came out in 2017, fans began to speculate the name of Bobby's final project. They found out it was supposed to be Ultra 85, deciphering a message detailing this ultimate effort, along with understanding the methodical approach Bobby had taken to his discography. The last album was supposed to be, again, Ultra 85, except it wasn't. On July 16th, 2020, Logic took to social media to officially announce that the highly anticipated No Pressure was indeed his final album, later claiming that this was Ultra 85. The symmetry was self-evident. To begin his official album discography with Under Pressure chronicling the struggles of new money, new fame, and his old lifestyle and old tendencies, moving throughout his career, growing and trying new things, always fighting for self-validation in an attempt to feel comfortable with who he is, and finally arriving at a point in his life where he is no longer second-guessing his every move or how it will be received, or how he makes his music, or what he says, or literally anything. He finally was under no pressure. As far as the way the album actually sounds, it was a bit different from anything he had done up until then. It's an Under Pressure sequel, but it still has its own identity. Using grimier production than what was on the original UP, also leaning a bit more again towards boom bap, whilst not exactly coming across like a YSIV, in the sense that he didn't sound like he was attempting to encapsulate the Sinatra persona, rather he was sincerely doing as he wished in a very still cohesive and meaningful way. But what really drove the entirety of this album and this moment in his life was something so much bigger than his music or anything else he was doing at the time. That being the fact that between the time Bobby announced No Pressure and the day it was actually released, almost a year had passed and his son had already arrived into the world. Inspiring countless verses and one-liners across this final album, in a way, Little Bobby is the soul of No Pressure, representing the reward for Logic's endless work ethic, or as he puts it, the sacrifice of his 20s to achieve what he had only dreamed of before. No Pressure, along with his newborn son, no pun intended, were a celebration of his career, a celebration of his discography, a celebration of the lore he cultivated, and finally, A celebration of not giving a single damn about any of the negativity that had constantly attempted to plague his being at large. And regardless of whether or not No Pressure was truly the end of his career as a rapper, Logic as a creative was definitely not done. Announcing a multi-million-dollar deal with Twitch, Bobby made his next moves clear as day. He would transition into the world of streaming while simultaneously continuing to work on and release things like beat tapes and chess matches for his faithful audience, turning his harshest of critics, rivals, and haters alike into friends. This was Logic at what can only be described as an all-new prime. This is why this era is called the next chapter, because it's the point in Logic's career where he goes on to something beyond a discography, a life as a father, to be there for his son, a career as a streamer to maintain a relationship with his fans while continuing to provide content, and a launching point for him to move on, writing films and more novels or literally whatever he wants because he has earned it. And this is where we find Logic today, fully evolved and ready to move forward. I really do appreciate it if you made it this far. It means so much to me and everything I myself am trying to accomplish. If you enjoyed this video, as always, a like is so appreciated, alongside a subscription with that notification bell on, so you never miss a new video about all of your favorite things again. What's more, I'll be leaving a snippet of my newest song at the end of the video. If you check it out, or you have the time to check it out, that would be absolutely great. I would so appreciate it. And once more, I'd like to say thank you for your time. Thank you for staying and watching the entirety of this video. God bless you.
For my family been saying that I'm different. My homies, they been asking why I'm distant. I promise I'm insistent. I'm blowing up in a fucking instant. My mission, that nothing missing, so the vision remain consistent. And you could probably ask your girl, cause I'm a favorite Latino. I'm that Bobby Tarantino, meets that childish Gambino. You could bet it on me, like I'm up in the casino, trying to earn another Cino, 100 miles out from Reno. I'm tired of all these motherfuckers that be talking racist. That's nonsense. I really got no time for no damn conversations, no conscience. So take a step back, reevaluate your options, cause y'all been selling out like some motherfucking options. Always gassed up, need nobody else to gas me.